I was pulling for Northwestern over the weekend.
I was too. They look good for the first half.
Oh yeah, I thought hell they're going to beat
Yeah, they
them.
look good.
So. Oh, we're recording, so are we actually live now, Dave? Oh, here we go. Okay.
Welcome to M2Techcast, a live internet radio show offering the latest news and interviews with the people driving business, technology, and politics in Michigan. Now, your hosts, Matt Roush and Mike Brennan.
Hey, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And we're back with the pre-holiday edition of the M2Techcast. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to scare you half to death in two different ways today. So we've got guests Dan Lorman and Richard Steeman, both cybersecurity experts with us today. And they're going to talk a little bit about this Russian hack of government and other systems that we've heard about. And then give us a little bit of a recap of 2020 and some predictions for 21 as well. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
All right. So it's officially called SolarWinds because that's the name of the actual brand of the company that did the software that apparently all the government folks use and a lot of other folks, big institutions. And I've been reading a lot about it for the last week, and I flagged stuff and sent it to y'all. I'm sorry, that Memphis y'all comes out. I can't seem to lose it. So let's talk a little bit about. Let's just assume that people just know there was a Russian hack and that's all they know. Richard, why don't you kind of give us some background on that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll try and go through the entire timeline as I know it now. So sometime in 2019, a company that sells network management software to most of the world was targeted by a couple of different Russian groups, as a matter of fact. One was poking around and they weren't quite successful. The other may have worked off of what they learned from the B team. And the A team came in and they basically got the signing certificate for software updates and compromised the software update server at the company called SolarWinds. There was even a report that the password to get into that server was SolarWinds123.
Oh, geez.
At any rate, over about 4 or 5 months, they successfully implanted this update. And then starting in March, it was pushed out to what we believe is 18,000 customers of SolarWinds, which, customers of SolarWinds includes 425 of the Fortune 500, all the branches of the military, the Pentagon, and the Office of the President, State Department, etc. And then about 2 weeks ago now, December 7th, we learned that FireEye had been breached, and they announced that they suspected these Russian hackers had stolen all of their hacking tools. FireEye, security vendor that had acquired Mandiant, which does penetration testing for their customers, has their own toolkit. And it's very worrisome if Russian hackers have stolen their top-of-the-line toolkit. So FireEye immediately was completely transparent, told us all about it, attributed the attack to the Russians, or at least, gave us enough indicators that we knew who they're talking about. And then released indicators of compromise, digital signatures for all of their tools. So you could immediately update your own security to block FireEye from attacking you. And then only a week later, we discover, probably because FireEye was digging around and was able to look at the actual malware used, of all these other government agencies that had been successfully breached for months, going all the way back to March. So basically the Russian hackers were sitting on these networks, grabbing information, supposedly listening to emails on Office 365 and other servers, and basically owning parts of the State Department, Commerce Department, DHS, maybe CISA, which is the security team inside DHS, and National Institute of Health and the Treasury Department. So enough critical agencies for us to get all excited about this kind of attack. So, and did they leave anything out, Dan? There's so many little details to this.
Not much. You did a great job. I mean, it's just the scope of this thing is tremendously large, global, And as we were talking before the show, we don't really know what shoe's going to drop next. What's going to come down the line. How badly this impacted different companies around the world. What were the impacts for them? But we do know it's tremendously impactful in many ways in government. Lot of talk in Washington right now about, obviously we're in the midst of a change in administrations. What does this mean for that? What does it mean for the Biden team coming in January? So it's not a great time for this to happen. It's never a good time to get hacked, but it's right at the end of the year, and there's a lot of heads rolling right now. A lot of people really are very, very worried.
Yeah, everybody's spending long hours trying to track down. CISA was fantastic, and they released all of the indicators of compromise and a good methodology to determine if you'd been breached. They gave all the government agencies about 16 hours to report if they had been hacked. By Monday of this past week, they had not gotten all those reports, no surprise. Yeah. And then Microsoft came out, and they know of 40 Microsoft customers that have been successfully breached. They won't tell us who those are, of course, because they have to work with them before they have their own disclosures. But they did break down the attacks, and only about 17 were against government agencies, 18 were against other technology companies. So there could very well be in this supply chain other technology companies that are being leveraged in order to attack other companies.
Some of the stuff I was hearing from other folks, I mean, obviously this has been a big talk point on the talk shows and also all these articles, was that they sort of saved all the defense related stuff until the very last, because then they figured they were going to get discovered once they hit those targets. And so people were calling it just classic espionage, not necessarily cyber warfare. And I know, Richard, you wrote a book about that. What do you think of those premises?
Yeah, I'm getting tired of hearing pundits saying this is all okay, this is espionage as usual. Bad on us for not being better prepared. I don't like that. You wouldn't like it if you were blamed, for being sexually assaulted because of the clothing you wore, or for having your house broken into because you had a bad lock on it, right? It's still the fault of the attacker. Always is, right. Always will be. So I don't like that whole approach, right? I do like to criticize government preparedness and government agencies. I don't like everybody else to pile on. This is, we don't know the repercussions. We don't know if it's just espionage. We don't know if the whole point was reconnaissance before a more malicious type of attack, such as Ukraine saw, where there's certainly a lot of reconnaissance before their power grid was shut down Christmas of 2015. So we've got, like Dan said, the other shoe is going to drop, and it'll keep all of us busy, reporting on it and trying to understand what's going on and trying to explain it for weeks to come.
Yeah, what do you think might have happened in terms of insertion of malware in this attack? Like things where they could, turn off traffic lights or, turn off utilities, or, the really nightmare scenario stuff.
Yeah, a lot of that's been going on for about 4 years already in the power grid. So Sandworm has been installing the same tools that they used in Ukraine throughout our power grid for a number of years, which is worrisome. It even falls in line with the so-called deterrence that even the Biden administration has. When Biden made his announcement, he basically was threatening retaliation and doubling down on deterrence. He said defense isn't enough. And I'm definitely one who falls in the camp of, no, we just need to be really good at defending, and we should beef up defense first before we think about things like threatening to shut off, a foreign country's power, right? Just as they could do to us. It'd be a very effective deterrence against the United States if they had that capability, less so effective against any other country in the world because they don't rely on their power grid as much as we do.
Some of the folks, again, I know maybe this will, you won't agree, but they were saying that this malware is so embedded it just burn the whole thing down and start from scratch because you're never going to be able to get it out. Do you think it's that severe?
Take that one, Dan.
No, I don't. And some of the articles I've been reading, but people I've been talking to, it's more like SolarWinds it's getting you in the door. I think a lot of the fear is what happened when people went sideways. So it's like once you're in the house, now what happens? And so I think there's a pretty good ability to diagnose this, to know who's been hit, to find the DLL, to find the track this down and say, am I a victim? Am I not? Do I have SolarWinds? Do I have the software? But the harder part is, okay, now they've been in your house. What else have they done? What other tools have they installed? Where else have they gone? What other stealthy things have they done in your environment? And I think there's a lot of fear around, okay, we're talking about other shoe to drop or other things that may have happened. They've been in there, as Richard mentioned, for months. So what's happened during that timeline, and where else have they gone? What other tool sets have they loaded up? What other actions have they taken? What other back doors have they put in? I think that's a bigger issue. So if you're gonna, I would not advise burning everything else down. But I think maybe somebody who really felt like they're everywhere or this is so bad, it's like, do they have the ability to know what else happened once they got in the house, if you will?
Yeah, and CISA's first recommendation was, if you have SolarWinds, to shut it off. And I thought that was not good advice, because you're going to need SolarWinds to track down some of these infections and to understand what's going on your network. So it's probably not a good idea to just shut off your infrastructure like that. But root around, find it, and find out what it did. And then you have to do the forensics to figure out what happened over the last 6 months.
Yep.
So what do you think the Biden administration is going to do? Clearly, and Trump continues to deny it's the Russians while everybody else says it is. So I think the Biden folks are going to take a much different tact on this. What do you think they may do next? Or when they get, well, it's about a month now, but when they get installed here in about a month, what are they going to do?
Richard, you want to start?
Yeah, back when Obama was elected, I wrote up a whole litany of things that they should do. They didn't do any of that in 8 years. And obviously the Trump administration didn't do any of that. And I'm afraid, you can kind of always predict what the Biden administration will do by saying it's a continuation of what the Obama administration did, right? At least, things were fairly stable back then. And most people are happy that we're going to get back to sanity. But for cyber, doing what you did in the past is usually the definition of insanity. So there's, they should really take a fresh look at this. And there's been push for somebody at the top for years, a cabinet level position, a congressional approved position, super cyber czar. Inside the federal government, that is never going to work, right? A cyber czar doesn't have budgetary control. They can't hold back somebody's budget for not following their instructions. All they can do is issue recommendations that you should follow. And then maybe GAO or OMB can follow up and say, hey, you should have followed the cyber czar's recommendations, and now we're going to do some sort of punitive action because you didn't. So, from day one, it's when I think of the largest organizations in the world, the way to get to jumpstart your security program is to push responsibility for security down to the actual people that do security. And that we could do in the federal government. So you could tell every agency head, every cabinet person, that there'll be repercussions to your budgets, your congressional efforts, and all the rest if you are breached like OPM was. And that's never happened. Everybody always gets out of jail, get out of jail free card. There are no repercussions in the military. A breach doesn't lead to a court martial, never has, probably never will. And yet, if you're in Cyber Command, or if you're in the, each of the separate branches, and your responsibility is preventing the bad guys from getting in, if you let your guard down physically, you would be court-martialed. Why not get court-martialed if you let your guard down and don't follow best practices in the cyber realm?
Yeah, I would just add real quick, Mike. I think I'm probably not as quite as doom and gloom as Richard is on that. But we mentioned earlier the Cyber Solarium Commission. There's a bipartisan commission that has a lot of recommendations. Really, cybersecurity should not be, and in my experience, in my years working in Michigan, but also with Homeland Security in the White House, by and large has not been a partisan issue. And I would say, clearly you could argue, which president did more, going back to Bush. You could talk about, what happened after 9/11. You could talk about the Obama administration, talk about now the new Biden administration, of course, the Trump administration. Reality is, with maybe an exception being the whole discussion we mentioned earlier about Russia, and was Russia involved or not, and Trump kind of, saying they weren't. By and large, I think there's a lot of consensus on the kinds of things that need to happen. I think people want to see a roadmap. I would agree with Richard, we mentioned earlier, the Solarium Commission is a pretty good roadmap. And if they followed those recommendations, they would make a lot of progress. I think there will be some senior appointments in cybersecurity in the Biden administration. Whether they are more successful than the Trump administration remains to be seen.
Yeah, I was going to ask Richard, what would be different in terms of how agencies manage themselves if the kind of accountability that you seek was in place? What do you think would be different?
Yeah, they would reprioritize some of their technology investments. So, purchasing inside government is really difficult. You've got giant budgets, right? $billion budgets for IT stuff. And you spend it, unfortunately, they tend to spend on their favorite projects. So it might be digital transformation. We're going to move to the new government cloud. We're going to do all these great things. But I would take any opportunity to deploy new systems, to deploy them securely and build a framework for that. How are you going to monitor it? How are you going to patch it and update it? Going forward, of course, the entire world is going to be looking very closely at patching and updating software and how do we secure that process. We've known about these vulnerabilities in updates at least since Flame, which is an NSA piece of malware that masked as a Microsoft update, and all the way to NotPetya, which was the most damaging cyber event in our history, which also used software updates from a little accounting company in order to take down Ukraine and most of the rest of the world.
Yeah, 10 years ago, you and I were talking about this as a book theme. When we did our original Cyber Stiletto book, we were trying to figure out what attack vector we were going to use. And we were discussing, the updates. Everybody just automatically clicks, yes, update, whether or not it's you should or not, right?
Yeah, updates, supply chain vulnerabilities, putting chips, on boards in China before they're shipped. Don't forget, all of our computers come from China, right? So we talk about, don't buy Huawei, and yet we all get our MacBooks shipped directly from a factory in China.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, the other thing, too, that you talked about was Cyber Command. Isn't it their function to defend and be offensive as well? I mean, I've heard that stories that they've got incredible capabilities within the Russian network, too. If they want to shut them down, they can. Is that true or not?
My understanding of Cyber Command's capabilities is a little more opaque than that of the NSA. The NSA, for sure, is deeply embedded. As people start talking about the Me Tooism, hey, it's okay for Russia to do that to us because we're doing it to them, even though we have no evidence of it. We now all kind of agree we must be, right? Because we're better than they are, right? We've got a budget that's probably, the NSA's budget is probably as big as the entire military budget of Russia. So they're doing something with all those people and all that money. So here's a question. Did the NSA see the SolarWinds attacks in the planning phases? And did they know all about it? And could they not say anything about it because it would have revealed their sources and methods? That'll be an interesting story if it breaks.
Yeah, and did they tip off FireEye as well? I mean, there's a lot of other subplots, and they can use third parties and.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're a former NSA guy. I mean, obviously you can't share a lot of the secrets, but what Richard said, do you feel like they have those capabilities?
I think Richard's right. I mean, I think, the old thing, first thing they teach you in NSA, you don't know what you don't know. So, I mean, I don't have a top secret clearance anymore. I haven't worked there. I haven't had a TSSI clearance since the late 90s. So, but a lot of friends work in that community. And I'll tell you, I know we have capabilities. I obviously we won't talk about specifics. The reality of it is that this is going on. And a lot of the smaller players are trying to get into the game. I mean, more and more stories around the world, nation states feel like this, the internet could be the great equalizer. It's they don't have billions of dollars to build nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers and satellites and put people on the moon and everything else. But a lot of them feel like, hey, I can compete in cyberspace. So, virtually every country in the world that's out there, has a program trying to do something to hack somebody. So it's going on. It's happening all over the place. And I do believe we have a lot of capability within the U.S. as well. So I'll just leave it at that.
Matthew?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So what do you think ought to happen going forward here from the standpoint of business, not so much government, but business? How do businesses protect themselves better from this kind of thing?
Well, I think the most immediate change is going to be, we're going to look at the signing of software, digital signatures of software updates, and how can we build trust back in? Because right now you just set up a couple APIs and you just download the updates when they're ready. And it's been forever best practice to update them automatically. Just do it, because they're patching some vulnerability they've discovered. And obviously that is not wise. And we have to do something more to trust that. I'm wondering, Dan, what do you think of I imagine a third party. That's what we have PKI for. We could have a trusted certificate authority that's signing the other ones. But that would just centralize all that control, and that would be a target for a nation state to go after, and then they could update everybody with false stuff. So not quite sure how to fix this.
It's hard because it's always people, processing, and technology. And so people always say, can't you build a perfect technology? Can't you? But somebody's got to use it, and there's truth in that, old adage, if you had a perfectly secure computer, nobody could do anything. And it's even if you have great technology, the processes can be flawed. The people could be flawed. We know what happened. Again, some people call him a hero. Some people call him a traitor. But, Snowden. I mean, there's so many stories of people, going back decades, going back, in our history of our country. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be vulnerabilities. And I like the idea, Richard. I think we have to definitely improve that whole patching process. The update process. I think more needs to be done there. But and as soon as somebody tells me they have the perfect technology that can't be hacked, I just laugh because you've got the people side, you've got the process side. Somebody can get in there. A trusted insider can do something that can cause the problem.
Well, that's the Snowden situation. He was the trusted insider, right?
Correct, exactly.
Of course.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left. I know it's that much time, but let's talk a little bit about 2021. Obviously, this is going to be with us probably for most of 2021, right?
Yep. Fixing
this problem. But beyond that, what do you see developing in the cybersecurity space next year?
I'll start.
Go for it. You
should jump in. I just published a blog. People can go to it. I think Mike, you guys are gonna post this. But the top 21 security predictions for 2021. These aren't my predictions. These are the industry. What I do is catalog every year. Everybody from Trend Micro to WatchGuard to FireEye, going right down the list. They all come out with really good reports. I'm actually an advocate for them. I know other people not so much. We had a horrible year predicting in 2020 because COVID hit us and nobody was predicting COVID-19. But they're a really good list of items that a lot of research have gone into these. They aren't just sticking your finger in the air and just saying which way the wind's blowing and guessing. A lot of trends around specifically, people working from home. COVID-19 has changed all of our processes. So what has that caused in way of challenges for us? Issues related to the cloud, issues related to mobile, which we saw last year as well. But certainly more and more challenges with ransomware that have just exploded. Those are all just some of the predictions that are listed in the top 21 security predictions for 2021.
Yeah, we'll be sure to post those this week. This morning you sent that to me and I didn't get a chance to post it yet, but we'll get that up there. Richard, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't like writing predictions, right? Because I used to do that, and some of them would eventually come true. But anyways, it takes a lot of guts, right? Maybe I'm getting too old to have the guts. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that we saw a gigantic surge in phishing attacks at the beginning of COVID, right? 600% increase using, just social engineering around tax credits and employment checks and all the rest. And we've seen some ransomware that came out of that, which would have been the early intent of the attackers. But some of those attacks were probably successful enough that the attackers got a foothold. So it's easy to predict that in the first 3 months of 2021, we're going to see a lot of breach announcements for huge data sets, very damaging to the companies that it happened to. And that's just the fallout from what happened in March of 2020. The other thing that I'm kind of happy about is that the technology around working from home, which did open up a lot of exposures, right? Because you took your employee base and you pushed them all out to their home networks, which weren't very safe. It's going to change the way that employers treat the technology that their employees use. And we're going to start seeing employers invest in home technology. So they're going to maybe, double up on bandwidth. So the employee doesn't have to worry about all the kids being on their Zoom calls for school during business hours, and adding security in, of course, SASE being the term of the day, and giving us more and more capabilities. It's going to be great. We're all going to have great microphones, great webcams, dual internet access. I've got my new router behind me there, so that's just serves my little writing shed. Satellite backup. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's one of the stories I just posted from Forbes that talking about not necessarily the cybersecurity aspect, but now that we've all got exposed to the fact that we really can work from home, at least the white collar workers can. Obviously, if you're an electrician or a plumber, you can't do that. But are they going to want to go back to the office? And if not, then what's that going to mean? Like you just said, for all that equipment, we're going to be selling people to work from home, right?
Yep. And people can move around finally, so, and it seems to be having an impact on certain real estate in certain areas, right? Tahoe is booming, right? The people are just moving from the Bay Area to Tahoe because they might as well. I know my stepdaughter's moving for, a few months to Colorado because she has to work remotely for University of Georgetown. It's great. Opens things up for people.
And I want to get my bar stool set up in Key West, and I'm going to have the mic there and, all the stuff so I can sit there and drink my mimosas and things and do my show, right? That'd be perfect.
And you better have palm trees blowing in the wind behind you.
That's it. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm looking out my window now at the snow. That's why I was thinking of Key West. So.
Well, and what do you tell the bosses that still insist on people coming to the office, still insist on FaceTime?
I've seen people criticizing those bosses saying, your times are numbered. You can't insist on people coming into the office. So new managers of the future will be good at doing Zoom calls.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Why don't you guys, the traditional shameless plug. I know you've been on the show many times. So Richard, let's start with you since you're on camera right now. How do people reach out to you, get more information, work with you, that sort of thing?
Yeah, just start by following me on Twitter @CyberWar, and I'll see you there. If you're a vendor, I'll definitely follow you back. If you're in the security, I'll follow you back. Okay,
Dan, working from that office in where are you, Okemos? I think it is.
Holt, Michigan.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah,
right.
at GovCSO, and you can follow me on LinkedIn as well. It's the same as Richard. Happy to respond to, and certainly visit my blog for Government Technology Magazine, Lorman on Cybersecurity.
And now Dan, former state CISO, is working for Security Mentor. Been doing that for what, 4 years now? Something like that?
Just over 6.
Really, has it been that long?
Yeah,
God, time does fly, doesn't it?
Thanks so much.
Right. Well, very informative. Thank you guys for joining us here at the end of the year. We'll get you both back on here real soon in 2021 when our next situation arises, right, Matt?
Absolutely.
Okay, take us out.
See you guys.
All right. Thanks very much to both Dan Lorman and Richard Steenan, our resident cybersecurity experts. We'll be back in just a minute with another segment of the M2 Techcast. For right now, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And you're watching the M2 Techcast on mitechnews.tv, PodcastDetroit.com, and wherever fine podcasts are distributed.
Lawrence Technological University graduates earn a degree and a higher starting salary. In fact, when it comes to earning potential, the Brookings Institution ranks LTU fifth among U.S. colleges and universities.
Hey guys, how's everything?
Be enriched. Be more. At LTU, possible is everything.
Salaries of Lawrence Tech grads are among the highest of any university in America.
Oh gosh, how bad is it? How bad is the hack? Yeah,
Wait, find out more at
just figuring it out,
ltu.edu.
but it's really
What
bad.
do you get at Lawrence Technological University? Everything. Great labs and studios, supportive professors, all the full campus life, NAIA athletics, and all the software you need to succeed. Be smart. Be more. At LTU, possible is everything.
Salaries of Lawrence Tech grads are among the highest of any university in America. Plan a campus visit to meet with counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at ltu.edu.
Hey, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And we're back with our pre-holiday edition of the M2Techcast. Well, we just scared the pants off you with cybersecurity risks, and now we have our very own infectious disease expert. He doesn't have a doctorate, but we call him Dr. Doom anyway. Certainly by virtue of experience, he's got everything but the dissertation. Fred, welcome to the show. It's Fred Brown, noted epidemiology expert.
Well, I think actually he does have a PhD, don't you, Fred?
I do not. I have an MBA.
Oh, okay. I thought you did.
I've got three undergraduate degrees.
We'll still call you Dr. Brown. And so now we have a different virus we're going to be talking about.
And a different vaccine.
And a different vaccine, yes. One of the things that I know Moderna just got FDA approved, I believe last Friday. And one of the things I was asking if you could do any kind of comparison between the two that are now on the market, as it were. With Pfizer, I know you have to store at ungodly cold temperatures, and that's a really bad situation. Whereas I'm told that the Moderna one is more like a refrigerator freezer type temperature. And so that would make it a lot easier for the healthcare providers and the drugstores. I just saw the CVS president on TV this morning. He's talking about how they like to use their gazillion CVS stores to get that out. So how do those two vaccines compare? Because I have a lot of people asking me, which one should I take? And I go, I don't know whether there's really a difference, but you can't mix them, right? You can't take the Pfizer and then the Moderna. It's got to be one or the other, right?
That's right. That's all we've tested for right now. I think it's likely that within a technology platform that you might be able to take them both, but it's not advised because we haven't tested it yet. I think eventually we might get there, but it's not really that important as it turns out. If you want, I can show you some of the data that was presented to the FDA. We can certainly talk about some of the supply chain stuff. I'm working on that extensively, and there is a big difference in the supply chain complexity with Pfizer versus Moderna. And you're right, it's all about the freezing. The Pfizer vaccine is much more fragile than the Moderna vaccine. The Moderna vaccine, they kind of in June, July last year, this year, excuse me, they actually changed one of the key ingredients. And as a result of that, they were able to move from a -70 environment, -70 degrees Celsius, so that's almost -100 Fahrenheit, to I'm a European, so I always think about centigrade. But so they were able to move from that -94 Fahrenheit environment to a +4. I'm sorry, -4 Fahrenheit situation. So that was really helpful. And while Pfizer did not make that change, they decided to keep going because they were a little bit behind Moderna. They didn't have as much manufacturing understanding as Moderna did when they were rolling things out. They just wanted to get out fast. We'll talk a little bit about that.
And the other thing is Moderna, they can crank out a lot more vaccine than Pfizer can, right? That's the other thing.
Well, it's yet to be seen. The thing about Pfizer is it only takes 1/3 of the dose level. So you're only 30 micrograms versus 100 micrograms. So even if you Moderna still has to crank out 3 times more just to stay even on a dosage basis.
Okay. Right.
That's sort of interesting. these little tidbits that come into play. So I'm not sure that Moderna will continue to out-manufacture Pfizer in terms of dosage. But I'll show you some of the things that were actually what I did is I actually created a presentation that kind of summarizes it because unfortunately Moderna and Pfizer weren't exactly comparable. They didn't have. We'll go into some of it. Let me see what I've got here. I think this is the right one. Let's go up the page here, and
There we go.
There we are. And so, I'll just start right here. How's that sound? This is the race, right? This is the big race. And what's interesting about the race, Pfizer against Moderna, is that basically these are the same technology platforms. They're both mRNA platforms. And you can see Moderna actually did all their discovery and preclinical work by March 4th. They were already into human beings by March 4th. That's unheard of, right? You know, they'd only just characterized the whole virus on January 10th. So, you know, in less than a month, about a month and a half, they went from all the way through all the animal studies all the way right into human beings. Pfizer took a little more time. Pfizer actually didn't have a technology. They had to go and look for one. So they went to BioNTech, like in the United States, called BioNTech, but they had to license in the product. And they were actually still testing which one they wanted to license in already through June. So they had 4 different options with BioNTech, and they decided to go with this 162 2B option. And they were already in phase 1. So they looked at the phase 1 results. And phase 1, basically, you're looking at whether you're getting an immune response. In phase 2, 3, you want to make sure that that immune response is actually effective. So in phase 1, well, we'll talk a little bit about those phases. So here we are. Moderna, you can see, actually started March 4th. Pfizer didn't start until about a month later, in April 1st. And then Moderna was done with its phase 1 in June 1st. And basically, Pfizer started its this graph is wrong. I have to change it. But if Pfizer started its at the same time, so basically, Pfizer caught up with Moderna by June, which is a lot. That's hard to do when you're a month behind. And then they surpassed them in phase 2, 3, right? So they not only got to the market earlier by 10 days, they actually enrolled 50% more people in the trial. I mean, that's a remarkable achievement. And so they were better scaled to do the work than Moderna was. And what's interesting is the Pfizer design was a lot smarter and a lot more efficient and a lot more complicated. So they actually executed better than Moderna. If I had to say, you know, who's been executed, that doesn't say anything about the technology, who has best technology. I'm just saying, as far as getting through the regulatory process, Pfizer had more experience, and it showed. And so what Moderna did, it's in September, they looked around and said, you know what, we don't have enough minorities and ethnicities, and we don't have enough older people in the trial, and we want to be able to test that. And so they actually slowed down their enrollment. Said, we're still going to go after 30,000 people, but we're going to now go after the elderly and minority classes so that we can demonstrate more with our trial. So they actually slowed down their trial in September, and then they enrolled the people that they wanted to enroll, the targeted audiences, and then they continued on, and that's what they did. Pfizer had the same problem, but you know what Pfizer did? They said, let's make it bigger. Right? They're doubling down on their size. They're doubling down on their competitive advantage. They're pushing hard on saying, okay, you know, we can manage this complexity, and we don't think Moderna can keep up. And they were right. And so Moderna has had, but the thing is, as you point out, Moderna's had a few years to think about their platform and their manufacturing, and they actually have done some of the manufacturing. So they knew what to put in, what to take out in terms of their manufacturing to make it more stable. And so Moderna has an advantage actually in distribution. Pfizer has an advantage in terms of time. So here is, as you know, we looked at these endpoints, and the overview on both Moderna and Pfizer is the checks means that their current clinical trials actually did demonstrate these things. So you can take those off the list of your worries. There's still in safety an issue where we don't have long-term safety results because we've only known about this virus for 9 months. The longest we could possibly have the safety is 9 months. And in fact, all we have is you know, since it's gone into human beings, which is since March. So that's we have to just wait that out. And we'd like to get to a point where the clinical trials, especially the large trials, are at 6 months plus. If we were, you know, going to do this, and that I think that's going to be a requirement from the FDA in order to go from an EUA or an emergency use authorization to a full approval, what we call a biological license application. In effectiveness, it reduced the severities of symptoms, and it was a fully, you know, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. That's the best we do is the randomized controlled clinical trials. And you can see, though, that there's still a couple questions open about efficacy. We don't know about transmission. There's some interestingly, Moderna submitted something at the last minute afterwards to the FDA. Wasn't part of the discussion, that says, by the way, we think we have an impact on transmission, which is a huge thing.
Big deal.
They just said one page, one little footnote. And then there's also, we don't know about the reduction of duration of symptoms because we didn't test long enough yet, and we don't know how they compare because they didn't do a side-by-side trial. We're getting as close to a comparison between Moderna and Pfizer as we possibly can without actually, unifying the trial. We don't have an understanding of the difference between this platform and other platforms, which would be interesting. Scalability, we don't know yet. It looks like Moderna has an early lead. But I think Pfizer is likely to catch up. The durability also, we can't know just because we haven't had it in people for long enough. So with that, let's take a look at the results. So here's phase 1. And here, the idea was, how much immune response do people have? And what was interesting about this is that after you take the vaccine, they compared it to both groups compared it to convalescent plasma levels. And each time, if convalescent plasma levels were 100, Pfizer jumped up to about 150 after 2 doses, and Moderna went up to 180. So the immune response of circulating antibodies, that's the antibodies that are out there being produced and don't get reproduced. They're not manufactured by the body. They're just out there circulating, is 50 to 80% higher than if you actually got the virus. And that's remarkable. Normally when we do a vaccine, we don't see, it's usually a partial response. In order to get the full response, you actually have to have the disease. In this case, we have to actually have a better response to what we're interested in than the virus itself, which is interesting. Unfortunately, there was some, the Moderna on the 71 plus, there was a notable waning after about at the end of the study in the over 71-year-old immune response. And we'll start to think about that as we look at some of the clinical data later. It's still protective, we think, but it waned, and much more than the other age groups. The other big question was, are we manufacturing antibodies to actually continue to have memory so that when we go beyond when we finally dilute all the antibodies that are circulating, but we have a memory to what's there? And the answer there is we have 2 different kinds of tests. The first is Cd4 test. That's a memory helper B cells that actually says, hey, there is something to attack. And the other are the T cells, the CD8 precursors. And those actually neutralize and eliminate the viral particles. Moderna only tested for CD4. At least they only reported CD4. And they were similar to the Pfizer. And you can see it's about a 4-fold increase. Pfizer also looked at CD8, which I think is important because you want to have as much of a response as possible. We'll talk about mutagenesis in a little while. And you can see that in this case, it was 12-fold higher, slightly over 12-fold higher response than just getting the disease yourself. Again, a tremendous accomplishment. So the result is, and when people say, hey, should you take the vaccine if I've already had the disease? What's your answer?
Yes.
Heck yeah. Right. I want to have the 50% and the 4 times more. I don't want to sit there, being right. So the answer is yes. If you've had the disease, you still want to get the virus, this vaccine.
And in both cases, you have to get 2 shots, right?
In both cases, you need 2 shots. So with Pfizer, you only have to wait 21 days, and you see an impact after 7 days after that second shot. With Moderna, their test was they actually you inject after 28 days, the second dose, and then they waited 14 days. So the amount of time that Pfizer is claiming that they need in order to have full immune response is actually 5 weeks. While with Moderna, it's over a month and a half, right? It's like seven weeks because you had to go through a 4-week plus a 2-week assessment period. 4 weeks, so 6 weeks versus 4 weeks.
Let me also throw out when you get vaccinated, one of the questions I'm getting from people is, do I get a card that I can show the airlines or I can show to whomever that says I have been vaccinated and both doses or whatever, so that I should be okay? That's what they're all wondering.
Oh yes, there'll be cards that are given out with your first dose, and you'll get a first stamp, and you're supposed to bring that card back again, get a second dose, and that will be right now what we offer for identification. Now, some countries, WHO is coming out in March with an entire kind of application they'd like to put on your cell phone that says we'd like to see this kind of information on everyone who's traveling around to confer to be internationally correct. So, but within the United States, I think it'll just be the card. When you start to move international, I think you're going to need to have an international level, because they're all vaccination ID or vaccination attestation.
And you won't be traveling to the UK, that's for sure.
I'll go into that if we have time.
It's mutated into some monster virus there or something, right? You know?
Yeah, some really interesting things. You want me? I can talk about that.
Interesting in the Chinese curse sense of the word. It sounds like.
I'll go back. I'll come back to that at the end because it's a really important point. I want to make sure let me just drain the slides here about the comparison between the Pfizer slides and the Moderna slides, and then we'll talk about mutations. Here's Pfizer, 44,400, Moderna, 30,351. You can see half of them were in placebo, so only half the people actually got the active ingredient. So when you look at the numbers, you'll see it's based on 15,000 people for Moderna and 22,000, about 17, 18,000 for Pfizer. The female and male, 50-50, that's good, right? There wasn't any bias in the selection. White, 82% to 79%. There was slightly higher use because the Moderna stopped the trial, actually tried to get the concentration of this target population into the trial more actively than Pfizer was able to. So that's slightly better if you're worried about the impact on an ethnicity or a race. You're slightly underrepresented as a Black person in both trials, which is disappointing, but you're not if you're Hispanic. You're certainly and Chinese is slightly approximately correctly represented as well. So the idea here is you want to make sure that you've got a representative, very large part of the population. It's completely representative, so that you can look at that and say, I see myself in there. I'm a white male between 18 and 65, I can see there was plenty of people in my category that got vaccinated, and I can feel pretty good about this. So in the case of Black Americans and those at health risks, it depends a little bit on which health risk you're at, whether you're fully represented or not. You might want to wait a little bit depending on the health risk you've got. And if you're immunocompromised, if you're pregnant, if you're a child, or if you have significant allergies, then those people were actually excluded from the trial completely, and we haven't tested those people yet. So and between 16 and 18, the Pfizer group does test them, but they were underrepresented. They only had about 100 people in that space.
Yeah, so that's another one. Is everybody wants to get their kids back in school, and we're not even testing that age group at all.
No, they will. They will start. Pfizer announced that, and Moderna both have announced that they want to start looking at that. There are two ways of doing it. One is to start a whole new trial, which says, these people are different. They're a different population. They have different immune response, especially for children under 2. That's very often the case. When you get to be, over 12, it's a little bit less the case, where you're completely different from the adult immune response. But there are significant differences, and so we either bridge to say, you see, these differences are bridged. We can use now the data that we use for adults, and we're confident. Or let's start the trial over again and just enroll like we would completely from anew. I think they're going to do bridging studies just because it's faster and they want to get out there faster. I think we'll be ready to do that at the point of submission for the BLA, which we think is going to be about 6 months away. The BLA is the actual application. Right now, we're still under emergency use. So we think about June, July timeframe, we will have tested for children and we'll have a general vaccine that's been approved by both these companies in that timeframe. So here's the process we went through. We 21 days apart for Pfizer. Moderna was 28 days apart. And then they had a 7-day, as I said, so it's a 4-week to efficacy endpoint. Moderna has a 6-week efficacy endpoint. And that becomes significant when you have to try to figure out how immune your people are as you roll this out, who's still susceptible, who's not susceptible. So Moderna takes a lot longer. Interestingly, J&J is a 1-dose and they have a 2-week observation period. So we can hit full immunity of the J&J endpoint results in 2 weeks. not 4 and not 6. That'll make a significant difference to policymakers and yourself if you only have to take one and done, and you're done, and you know in 2 weeks you're ready to go. So if you're ready for that big trip and you need a vaccine that's 2 weeks away, you know, you're too late for Moderna, you're too late for Pfizer, but J&J, you could do it. That'll happen. So there are some interesting little tidbits that, you know, come through here. Also, if you're concerned about trying to return to a rural area that's very hard to get to, if you're part of the vaccination group, we're worried about this. You know, rural Wyoming, we only want to go there once. Take the J&J vaccine, right? And sure don't want to have Pfizer, because that's going to, you have to bring out that twice at -20. Minus 70, that's a pain. But here's the case definition endpoint. You can see basically anybody who had any of these symptoms, and we talked about this last week, was said, aha, you've got that symptom. That means you've got COVID. Let me test for it. Yep, sure enough, you've tested positive and you had one of those symptoms. So you're in a special group, and we're going to assemble all these guys together. At the end of the day, we had 170 people who got COVID in the Pfizer, and 180 or so, as I recall, actually it was over 230 that were in the Moderna trial who got COVID. And so that then we looked just at those 180 and just at those 180 and just at the people who got sick. So here is how efficacious it was, right? Here are the people who got sick, and basically 95% of the people who were the efficaciousness, what we were looking for from the FDA was over 50%. So over 50%, if you had 200 people that got sick, you'd expect 100 and 100 if it was completely ineffective, right? If you move that to 150, so that you get 25, if you get 125 versus 75, that's a 50% efficacy rate, and you're approved. In this case, out of the 200, we had 190. Well, we're not, and only 10 that were vaccinated. So 10 people were vaccinated, and 10 of them got sick out of that group of 200 versus the 190 in the placebo group who got sick. So that's how you look at the efficacy numbers overall. You can see statistically these vaccines are the same. I'm still a little bit worried about the over 65 number. I think this might be something that's real, and I think it might be that they don't have quite as much efficacy in people in Moderna over 65. Time will tell. Statistics say it should all even out, but I think it may be a real signal. We'll have to wait and see. You can see that if you're at risk, if you've got certain disease types, still you're 95% reduction in the infection rates. If you're white, 95% reduction, or 93.2, close enough statistically. If you're in community of color, 95 or 97%, again, effective. Male, 96 or 95%. Female, 93% effective. So in every case, these are vastly superior to most vaccines that are out there in terms of efficacy, and certainly higher than the endpoint we were looking for. So that's the good news, is that if you go to the doctor right now and you get Moderna or Pfizer, as far as efficacy goes, probably doesn't make a difference. Statistically, it doesn't make a difference at all. So you shouldn't have to ask for one or the other. I want to watch that 65 plus number. So if you're over 65, you might have a slight preference to get the Pfizer drug based on this data, but it's only a slight preference. And again, statistically, it is not significant. So that's and the other big thing was it prevents severe infections. So of the Pfizer group, of that 180 I talked about, 9 of them had severe infections, and of the 230 or so Moderna people, 11 of them had severe infections. Of the 11 that are on Moderna, none of them were in the active group. All of them were in the placebo group. The chance of that happening randomly is about 1 in 10,000. So it's a very significant result, and we think that this therefore does prevent active serious COVID disease in both cases. I think that Moderna actually had a broader set of endpoints here, so it actually tested for more different severe responses, including kidney failure and all sorts of things that you might be worried about. Again, their results were slightly better than Pfizer's. Pfizer's complained a little bit at the FDA. They said, it was a little bit unfair. We had someone right at the border, is 93% oxygen level. She never went to the hospital. Meanwhile, everyone who had the placebo group, turned green. I'm joking, but they were saying that they thought that it wasn't really a true serious adverse event, but it classified as one. So that's what the numbers are. I think slowly but surely the statistics will work their way through, and you'll see no difference between the two drugs.
We got about 4 minutes left.
You're kidding.
No.
So here's Moderna. You can see the reduction in COVID cases. We never got to the 94.1. Here is Pfizer. So people are going to say, do I have to take 2 doses? And the answer is, if you want to stay safe and be that 95%, you better take 2 doses. The best you can hope for with 1 dose of Pfizer drug or probably 1 dose of the Moderna drug is between 50 and 80% effectiveness. And that doesn't put you in herd immunity range if you're a community. So you take both doses. And there may be an opportunity to look at a single dose, but wait until afterwards when they've done a clinical trial. So let me talk about mutagenesis quickly, if that makes sense. And that is here. We had in the United Kingdom, they have a variation where they've moved from in the London area from a virus that was only 28% representative in the group in all the viruses in London to now being 68%.
Wow.
In 3 weeks. And when you do all the math, it turns out that means it probably has penetrated that community 70% faster than the original virus. And so that's how we got to this, holy cow, look at this. It was almost at nothing. And all of a sudden it became, over half of what we see today. And that's how come they say it's 70% more transmittable. Now, you know how that happened? They think, now they don't know for sure, but they think that there was an immunocompromised person in the mix who had a continuous long-term COVID infection. And they were immunocompromised, so they kept injecting them full of Regeneron monoclonal antibodies. And slowly but surely what happened was the virus got smarter and smarter and smarter, and it has so the amount of mutation it had 14 mutations in a very short period of time.
Oh, geez.
About 2 to 4 months period. And so we think that we artificially selected for this because we medicated this particular patient, and he cultured this virus and then spread it. And that's what can happen when you put things under selective pressure. So we really have to watch, what medicines we're giving people, manage it actively, and make sure that this doesn't happen to our vaccines. Because if it happens to a vaccine, we got big problems. So that's how it all works anyway.
All right, boy, I'll tell you. I just was watching that over the weekend, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't realize this thing was so smart, so.
Oh yeah, there are so many. I mean, it goes through 40,000 generations in a few days. So, you don't have to be that smart. You just have to have enough of you, and eventually you're going to break through, right?
Yeah, battering at the door. Okay, well, we'll get you back next week.
Love to. We got so much more to talk about. I'm sorry, I was supposed to talk about safety, and we can certainly go into that. The answer is these vaccines are statistically the same.
Okay.
Across safety and efficacy.
Well, and the other question is, how soon can I get it? And I've looked at for the state of Michigan, they issued their how they're going to do it and what groups, starting off with the healthcare folks, and then the older compromised folks and or people with other situations like that. And then anybody over 65, of course, Matt's just a young kid, so he'll have to wait till the final group.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I'm an older
missed it by 11 months. Yeah. Right.
Oh, missed it by just that much.
You got to start smoking again and tell people you're older than you are, man.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Great.
It's gonna be pretty wild out there for about 4 months, and after that, I think starting around June, people will basically, if they want the vaccine, I think they'll be able to get it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm hearing. Is by early summer, if everything plays out like everybody thinks, we'll start to be okay. But it's probably going to be fall before things really start coming back to normal, right?
Oh yeah, I think that's right. Economic normalcy, fall, kind of Halloween time frame, and then health normalcy even longer, unfortunately. But we'll go into that next week. How does that sound?
I got some. That's good, Fred. All right. Thanks very much, Fred Brown, our resident infectious disease expert. We'll be back again next week, the 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Until then, everybody have a Merry Christmas. And next week, we'll wish you a Happy New Year. For right now, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And you've been watching the M2 Techcast.
So, gashes, yeah, I